Well, let me welcome everyone here. We've got a great group for you on a really important topic. I am glad to be joined by my colleague, Martin Heinrich, who is the Senate Democratic thought leader and policy leader on energy issues. And he and I are doing something that's a little bit unusual, which is challenging a presidential emergency declaration. Doesn't happen a lot, but this is the time it should happen. I'll talk a little bit about the effort and why we're doing it. Senator Heinrich will then speak, and then following Martin, we will have comments from three preeminent environmental leaders in our country. First, Jackie Wong, who's the Senior VP for Climate at the NRDC. Next, Ben Jealous, who's the Executive Director of the Sierra Club. Third, Tiernan Sitterfield, who's the Executive Vice President of Government Affairs at the League of Conservation Voters. After that, we'll open it up for questions. On President Trump's first day in office, he signed a number of orders, and one of the orders he signed was an energy emergency declaration using a particular statute that allows such a declaration that can be challenged by Congress. One of the bits of language that the president used in the order was this: the policies of the previous administration have pushed the nation into an energy emergency. The declaration of emergency is a complete sham. It's a complete sham, and that's the reason that we're challenging the declaration of emergency. If there's an emergency, it's Donald Trump, but it's not American energy. If you look at this chart that shows the growth in American energy production from 1950 to 2023, and we would have one more year to add on to that. But what the chart shows is America is producing more energy than we ever have. Last year, America produced more gas than we ever have, produced more oil than we ever have. And the thing that's really exciting is the rapid acceleration of renewable power, which is shown in this green part of the chart. It was the best year for energy production, all in the history of the United States. In addition, the United States is now, there's probably a technical term for this. I call it, we're an energy surplus nation. We produce more than we consume. Those lines kind of crossed in 2019. We started to produce more than we consume. But last year, we set a record in that surplus. And that surplus has been valuable in terms of our own economy, but also in other goals, like helping nations around the world wean themselves away from having to rely on petro-dictators for energy. So there's no energy emergency. The previous administration's policies, the president's talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill and other things that have helped lead to this dominance of American energy. If there is an emergency, however, it's what Donald Trump is doing right now. Donald Trump is unplugging energy projects all across this country. I'll let Senator Heinrich talk about it from the global perspective and from New Mexico. But in Virginia, we have a number of projects that have been announced with great fanfare, including by a Republican governor, that have relied on tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act. Those projects are now up in the air and potentially in jeopardy. We have a huge grant that was awarded to our port, the Port of Virginia, to completely electrify all their cranes. That grant is in jeopardy. We've got an offshore wind facility that's probably farther along than virtually any. There were 2 working turbines in a test pattern, but now we're building around 70 turbines. It's about half completed, and not just the turbines and the pylons, but subsea cables, et cetera. That project is now under jeopardy. The Office of the Department of Energy that administers grants under the IRA was shuttered as part of the DOGE effort. Donald Trump is waging a concerted war against energy projects, and he's killing jobs. And when you kill energy projects, constricting supply at a time demand is going up, you're also increasing costs. And you increase costs further when you put tariffs on the importation of energy from Canada, for example. So America is dominating in energy. Why would Donald Trump declare there to be an energy emergency? And after declaring there to be an energy emergency, why would he unplug project after project after project all across this country? The answer is just pretty darn simple. This is a headline from The Guardian, although there's similar headlines from other publications that came out in July. Trump promised to scrap climate laws if U.S. oil bosses donated $1 billion to his campaign. He had a meeting at Mar-a-Lago. He brought in folks from the fossil fuel industry. He eyeballed them and said, you support me in a major way, and I'm going to unplug environmental laws to your benefit. And this was a quote. One of the attendees of the meeting said, Donald Trump says you'll get it on day one. And they did. They got it on day one. And what did they get on day one? They got an agreement. They got in the emergency declaration, Donald Trump directed his administration to cut back on the Clean Air Act's application to projects, cut back on the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, National Historic Preservation Act, National Environmental Policy Act. We're going to cut back on all of these protections that Congress has put in place. But to go even further, the first thing in the executive order, the first thing that President Trump directed agencies to do was make aggressive use of eminent domain. Take private landowners' property to benefit big oil. And I want to focus on that. If you read the executive order, it sounds a little bit benign because it talks about the need to promote energy production. Energy production. Well, we want to produce energy. You know, we want to be a strong energy economy. It's only when you get to the bottom, there's a definition of energy production that intentionally excludes wind and solar. The definition of energy production that we're going to scrap all these laws to promote: oil, gas, coal, nuclear, hydrothermal, biodiesel, but not wind and solar. So we can scrap or reduce or minimize all these to benefit my friends, but if it's wind and solar, no, they don't get the benefit of these reductions. And that's why Donald Trump is killing jobs with the unplugging of these projects and raising costs. The procedure that we're using is a procedure that allows even one member of Congress to challenge a presidential emergency declaration under normal circumstances. It's not used very often. But this emergency declaration is such a sham, devised for such a corrupt purpose, that Senator Heinrich and I decided we're using it. It's hard for the minority to gain the floor and gain control of an issue. Usually the agenda on the floor is set by the majority, and that's a reality. Wish it wasn't the case, but it is. But there are about 4 things that not only a minority, but even a single senator can do to force a vote on the floor of the Senate, and we're going to force a vote, force everybody to declare where they are on this sham emergency declaration and this unnecessary degradation of important environmental protections. The schedule right now is that we would run through reconciliation this week, and we locked in a schedule whereby the debate on this is going to be a 6-hour debate followed by a vote sometime before next Friday, likely to happen early to mid next week. That was locked in yesterday. And now, again, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Senator Heinrich. We came into the Senate on the same day. We are both University of Missouri graduates who strangely ended up in other places. We've been close friends, and he's the Democratic leader on energy issues. And Martin, I'll just let you then introduce the speakers to follow.
Thanks, Tim.